During March of 2020, Malaysia closed up its borders and put the country into lockdown. Malaysians who work in Singapore now no longer had the ability to visit Malaysia regularly, and those who have family in Malaysia were forced to choose to stay in Singapore or go back to Malaysia with their families. These people affected by lockdown, they are separated from the people that they love the most by a distance greater than just 1,056 meters.
My name is Denzel. I am age 19, turning 20 this year. I'm from Malaysia, Malacca. What are some of the challenges that I faced during this pandemic lockdown? I guess because I'm Malaysian and my parents are based in two different countries. My dad is based in Wuhan, China, yeah, and my mom is based in Malaysia, Malacca, taking care of my brother, right? So because of COVID, I can't visit them at the same time.
My name is Tan Kim Ann. I am 19 years old this year. I was born in Malaysia. Life during quarantine for me was very monotonous, very lonely, and very frustrating. Frustrating and lonely because most of my family was in Malaysia. I couldn't find time to talk to them because during quarantine I still had to deal with school. I still had to deal with classes. It was especially hard because I'm not close to any of my relatives in Singapore. So not being able to talk to anyone I was familiar with other than my friends who were also busy with assignments was very tough on me.
One big aspect of these issues is loneliness. For these people affected, they are without their families. Being alone, not being able to talk to anyone most of the time, leads to people feeling separated from society and can have impacts on mental health.
What kind of place do I live in right now during the quarantine? I stayed in the same place where I moved in. I came to Singapore. I live in a 2-room apartment and I rent a room, and that's where I spend most of my time in quarantine. And there's nothing much, it's just a keyboard and a guitar and my laptop. So I play around and I make music and stuff like that, and that's what I do during quarantine.
I felt very lonely at home because I was dealing with a lot of academic stress and a lot of stress put on by my family, and I had no one to talk to about it because my friends were all busy with assignments, so I didn't feel like I could talk to them because I didn't want to burden them with my problems. Usually I talk to my mother. I felt guilty trying to message her about my own problems when she has to deal with her own parents who are suffering from chronic illnesses. My situation with my father is complicated. I wouldn't say we have the worst relationship with each other, but it's very rocky because we have very different worldviews. So it's very tough to try and have a conversation or have a normal family dynamic with him.
After lockdown started, Malaysians who were supposed to be visiting family or going back to Singapore suddenly were not able to do so. People who saw their families on an almost daily basis, like students or younger generations, were not able to do so. It's a special kind of feeling, this kind of involuntary separation from your family, not being able to see them face to face. It is a terrible sort of separation that no one deserves to experience.
I think one of the biggest motivating forces that pushes me to do what I love to do, right, is the fact that I want to support my family. I want to take care of my family, and that's why I'm working so hard and I'm putting in the work, and because I want to take care of my family, because they have given me so much as parents, I believe they deserve a great retirement, and that's what I plan to do.
I was separated from my family because my mother had to go back to Malaysia to take care of my grandparents. My grandfather was diagnosed with liver failure and heart failure. And because my relatives in Malaysia, they also had to work, and my grandmother was suffering from thyroid, there was no one to take care of him, no one to bring him to dialysis. So my mom had to go back and I had to stay here to study.
All of us have experienced how it feels like to be stuck at home all the time. The feeling of isolation, of oppressiveness, the walls closing in on us. But these people have to go through that without support from their families, an already bad situation made worse.
How do I cope being by myself and not being with my family during lockdown? I guess besides acting, I enjoy music a lot. So I write my own music, I play piano, I sing. And it was almost to a point that music was like therapy to me. So during lockdown, when I was feeling all these overthinking and missing my parents, I play music, I write music, and it it's therapeutic, and I feel a lot better right after that. But one thing that I do have to mention is that when they first mentioned lockdown, and I know that I'm gonna be in my own room and my own space all the time, because I'm a person that overthinks a lot. So how it affected me mentally, I tend to overthink a lot more because I'm not doing something. I'm in my room most of the time. So that's something that I experienced during lockdown.
It is one thing to not be able to see your family. It is a completely different beast when you know that they are in trouble, but you are unable to see them, to help them. The overwhelming feeling of powerlessness and helplessness, of not being able to do anything except stand by and watch your loved ones falter. It is, in every sense of the word, heartbreaking.
How do I feel that my dad is in the eye of this whole pandemic, right? Worried. My dad turns 70 this year. It sucks that it comes now that I do not know anything that can happen to my dad if he doesn't take care of himself. And yeah, I worry as a son. When do I foresee that I can go back to see my family? I don't know. I really don't. Mom?
Yes.
Mom, 今天怎样?
I was very close to my grandfather. I considered him my father figure because he raised me. I grew up with him. I grew up with my grandparents. The situation with my grandfather during quarantine was that he went back and forth between critical condition and being stable. So when my mother was there, she would update me about his condition, and multiple times they had to bring him to the hospital. Yes, I was able to view the funeral. I had stayed up almost the whole night to make sure that I could see it. They finished the prayers and everything. I saw all the way up till when they carried his casket to go to the crematorium. I really, really regret being able to see it because his mind was also starting to fade. He was getting very forgetful. So every time he asked for me, they would tell him that I was studying, that I couldn't come to visit, and that they were on MCO, they were on lockdown, so I couldn't come visit anyways. But he would keep asking because he would either forget that they told him or he would forget that there was a quarantine. And I just feel very guilty about that.
But through all these problems that came up for these people, was it worth it? Was the benefits of lockdown worth the cost it took on their lives?
I think quarantine was troublesome, but it was necessary. I think ultimately, although how much I care for my mom and my dad and this whole situation, right, I cannot be selfish on my part and not care about the health and safety of other people. So, was it worth it? I would say yeah.
I think yes, the benefits of quarantine were worth the effects on my life because it still feels very unfair to me that I couldn't be able to see him. But my grandmother is also very weak. I wouldn't have wanted to accidentally contract COVID and bring it into their house. And at least now there's less community cases in Singapore. So I do think that the benefits were worth it.
Even though people are put into terrible, horrible situations that push them to their limits, somehow they make it through. When we are separated from our families, we find ways to contact them, to talk to them, to see them, to connect. No matter what happens, humanity always survives. We are creative in our ways of defying fate.